We are building the calculator project from the YByte Python curriculum available at www.ybyte.in. Previously, we saw how we could use the grid method to place these buttons in a very nice grid, including a different width or a different height for, say, some of these buttons, depending on the row span or the column span. Now, we use this pretty interesting option called sticky. And I said I'll talk about it a little bit later. So this video, let's spend some time on what this sticky really means and what happens if we do not use this. That's a good way to understand what sticky does. Remember that in the grid method, we are basically converting, the window into many cells. We are dividing it into cells. Now, sticky really means how does a widget appear inside this cell? Remember, inside a cell goes one widget. The question is, if the widget is smaller than the cell, then does it go north, south, east, or west? Or as we are doing north, east, southwest, which means basically go and cover the entire space of the cell. That's what we have done. Now, the best way, like I said, to understand this is, let's say I did not have this sticky option at all. So let's say if I did this, I say replace this, all my sticky equals to NSEW, just replace them all with nothing. Notice all the sticky statements have been taken out. Now, when I run this code, this is very interesting. What happens is that every button seems to appear a little bit smaller and also centered. Most interestingly, the C button and the equal to buttons as well as the 0 buttons appear to be in the middle of the columns, or let's say middle of the rows. And that's because, remember, only for these buttons, the cells are bigger because we have merged certain cells. And this option is now coming into play. So the button is appearing somewhere over here. Now, of course, you might argue that, well, at this point, I can go and set the size of these buttons. I can set the width of these buttons because that will implicitly make the cell, whatever it is, and occupy the entire cell. But that is quite painful. It's quite tedious. So it's easier to use the sticky method to sort of, make it appear as the way it was. Now, let's just explore a little bit further. Let's say I go back to my NSEW, but instead of, let's say, so let me just say tk dot, instead of say tk.nsew, let's say instead of this I did say tk.n, which means that everything should be north aligned, so sticking to the north. And if I did this, notice I see no difference on these rows because the size of the buttons is same as the size of the cell. But on the C and the equal to button, notice they look as though they have sort of moved up because they are being north aligned. Now, one thing about, Tkinter grid is that we are not explicitly stating the size, the height and the width, but we could do that. For example, let's say I go and set height of, let's say, this guy to be 3. Now, notice this is the first button. Now, this is again very interesting. When I run this, what happens is that my buttons look a little bit distorted, but nonetheless nice. Notice the 7 is taller, and hence my entire row width has been set to being taller than, let's say, the button width. My alignments are all north, and hence all the buttons are going upwards. Like I said, we could use the height and the width to again make the grid look quite full. But in this case, it doesn't really, add up. So what I will just do is, as I had done earlier, I will use my sticky options, and this time I'm just going to say change all my sticky to, let's say, NSEW. Now, when I replace that, I'm back to where I started, which is a grid which is looking quite nice, quite neat, and serves my purpose. So basically, sticky allows me to kind of occupy the entire cell. It eases out the work in the grid method because I really don't have to think on many other aspects, and it looks quite nice. Just before we wrap this up, notice the options here are exactly the same as what we had for the anchor, tk.east, tk.west, and the definition is also similar. I hope you found this useful. If you think this way of learning, by building stuff, by trying things, by by thinking about different problems, it helps, it's interesting, look at our website because we have many such activities that you can look at. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye bye.